As part of its strategic alignment, the Industrial Development Corporation has embarked on a long-term sustainability plan to prioritize effective development, financial sustainability, client and people centricity. The strategic review has resulted in a refocused business model and strategic priorities with a revised operating model and organizational design. The IDC continues to implement its strategy within selected sectors to develop and expand industrial capacity, create and preserve jobs, and drive transformation and spatial equity. To address the continent's energy needs, we are focusing on the clean energy solutions industry with a specific focus on the energy storage value chain. Our objective is to establish South Africa as a major player in the global energy storage industry. Thus, we are pursuing opportunities in renewable energy generation, including electricity generation by companies for their own use. On the technology front, we are supporting Fourth Industrial Revolution-enabled industries with a specific focus on the data analytics industry. We continue to engage with various industry and government forums dealing with the Fourth Industrial Revolution to increase South Africa's adoption of these new technologies. One of the beneficiaries of our funding is Data Profit, a company that uses machine learning technology to assist manufacturing enterprises reduce and eliminate defects and scrap rates in their processes. The Cape Town-based company develops unique software products that optimize manufacturing processes to reduce defects. In Stellenbosch, we have funded Mellowcabs, a local manufacturer of South African-designed and developed light electric vehicles, a market with the potential to create new opportunities for local business worldwide. The investment has positioned Mellowcabs in this high-growth sector as a local equipment manufacturer for the electric vehicle market with export potential to Europe, India, and the USA. All Mellowcabs vehicles will be produced locally with some imported components. Final assembly and component manufacturing will be in-house to ensure reliable vehicles that benefit from continuous research and development. In the Free State, the IDC funded Kivali Chemicals, the first black-owned manufacturing company within the chemical sector. The company manufactures, distributes, and markets detergents, disinfectants, and water treatment and adhesives. The whole plant has been built around IDC funding. In Limpopo, Tzaneen, Blueberries established 17.5 hectares of blueberry plantations at its own cost. The company required additional funding for the completion of the development, which included funding to bring the existing plant to bearing stage, building the pack house, and procuring farming equipment. The IDC's funding for the project enabled the growth and continues to bear fruit for surrounding communities by delivering accessible jobs to the people of Tzaneen. In Mahikeng, Kgatelopele, an IDC-funded wellness center, assists patients with mental illness. This is the brainchild of 3 Mahikeng-based psychologists. The 32 beds facility with 35 employees works with patients from Mahikeng, Rustenburg, and surrounding areas. It caters for subacute illnesses, recovery and rehabilitation, chronic and palliative care, as well as psychiatric conditions that require hospitalization, with the growing workforce which mostly consists of female employees. The much-needed clinic is bringing new opportunities to the region. A group of female farmers from rural Umsinga in KwaZulu-Natal approached the corporation for assistance with setting up their own bakery. The IDC ensured the sustainability of the startup business by providing the farmers with an expert to assist with the feasibility study of their business proposal, which is now established and fully operational. Go Green Bakeries now supplies fresh bread to members of the surrounding communities at affordable prices. The 2 bakeries currently employ 14 women and 6 young men with potential for much more. We believe that businesses must take responsibility for the impact of their activities on people and the environment. As an institutional investor, we follow an ethical investment approach in which we use our investment to bring about positive social and environmental changes. The Industrial Development Corporation, your partner in development finance.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In line with the times, please be aware that our gathering today is informed by social distancing regulations, and for clarity and auditability for our webcast, I'm going to ask for your permission to take off the mask. My name is Tshepo Ramodibe. I'm the head of corporate affairs. To kick off this program, I'd like to acknowledge Minister Doko Didiza of the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. Online, we've got the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, His Honorable Mr. Ibrahim Patel. We also have TP Nchocho, the CEO of the IDC, and Dr. Ramasodi, who's the Acting Director General in the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning as we look to engage and announce a progressive partnership between the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development and the IDC. And I think it comes at a critical moment. The Minister has been visiting ports, all parts of our country, really talking about the mandate of the department and the ambitions, but also the intent going forward. But I think this is all in the backdrop and informed by national development and priority plans that spoke to ensuring that rural communities, farming communities, enjoy opportunities to fully participate in the economy, livelihoods. And the National Development Plan spoke to, with the critical foundational building blocks, agriculture has the potential to create over 1 million jobs by 2030 and play a leading role in shaping the South Africa that we all want to live in. To capitalize on this, there's a need to expand irrigated agriculture, cultivate underutilized farmland, support commercial agricultural sectors, and establish opportunities for collaboration. And collaboration is exactly what we are talking to today and are realizing. In recent years, the task of converting all these intentions and plans has been assigned to two key ministers, Minister Doko Didiza and Mr. Ibrahim Patel. Together they've spearheaded not only agricultural industry master plans, but also progressive engagement between the DTIC, DELOD and others. Our program literally will invite Minister Didiza first to give her opening remarks, and immediately we'll switch over to Minister Patel. Without further delay, it is my honor and pleasure to invite Mr. Doko Didiza to take to the podium and deliver opening remarks. Minister, thank you.
Our Program Director, my colleague, Minister Ibrahim Patel, as we commonly refer to you as EP, and I'm sure those in the labor movement, that's the name they would know very well. Our CEO of IDC, Mr. TP Nchocho, Acting Director General of the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, Mr. Ramasodi, our senior officials from both IDC and the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, our various stakeholders who are on the platform, some of them here, ladies and gentlemen of the media, all protocol observed. I must say that as we start today, we are saddened, of course, of the news that we've heard of the passing of President Magufuli of Tanzania, as we also have a memorial of King Goodwill Zwelithini Kabhekuzulu in Nongoma today. But also would like to acknowledge that majority of us as South Africans have lost our loved ones, our friends, colleagues, and associates. All of us have lost somebody we know. And for that, we would like to pay our tributes for the contribution that all of these men and women, young people, children, and the elderly have had in our country and globally. I must say that today is an interesting and an exciting day for the agricultural sector. In finally coming to launch this important instrument that will support our farmers and rural communities in being able to sustain themselves, but also to contribute to the economy of South Africa. During the fifth administration, the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries identified the lack of agricultural finance as a hindrance to the commercialization of black producers. While there were many products in the market, it was clear that the funding cost was too high to enable new entrants to access funding and succeed in their farming operations along the value chain. In consultation with a wide range of stakeholders in the agricultural sector and the private financial industry, including discussions at Operation Phakisa Lab on agriculture in 2017, a blended finance model was mooted as an instrument that can address the lack of affordable and patient capital in agriculture. The government undertook a pilot project with the Land and Agricultural Bank in 2018, and we learned some lessons there on what we need to improve and also what we need to do in order to make sure that funding instruments work efficiently for our producers and agribusiness industries. It is important to note that blended finance as a concept is well vexed in the market and the government system. Minister Mboweni, speaking on the Infrastructure Fund, alluded to this financing model, which the state will utilize in leveraging private sector investment for the infrastructure build program. In the same vein, the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development uses its grants to liberate private sector investment towards increasing and expanding production on land reform farms, communal lands and privately owned farms. This will also help accelerate land redistribution by supporting the acquisition of agricultural land and assets along the value chain. The Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, in partnership with the IDC, has been working solidly over the past few months, from September 2020 to be more specific, towards the establishment of the Agri-Industrial Fund. The fund will be based on an initial allocation of 1 billion grant to the IDC from the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform, Rural Development over the 5-year period to develop and implement high-impact, large-scale commercial agricultural transaction projects with black ownership, which is 60% and above, including broad-based community trusts. The fund's objective is to support the development and expansion of the agricultural sector by assisting qualifying black producers, investees in developing or expanding, acquiring and integrating operations in prioritized value chains. We aim to achieve the following goals through this fund: expansion of agricultural production, accelerate land redistribution and wealth creation by commercializing projects on such land, We aim to create jobs and also transform our sector, increasing exports as well as effective land reform and rural development underutilized land. I must say, colleagues, that this fund has actually come at the right time. We will be soon finalizing the Agriculture Agro-Processing Master Plan. This will be in addition to the Poultry and Sugar Master Plan, out of which we have identified funding as one of the critical elements to support such growth and development in the agricultural sector. Grants will be based on preset qualifying criteria. Before I get to that, it is important to note that the long-term lease agreements, including permission to occupy, that is longer than the period of funding, will be accepted as adequate security to enable access to funding. One of the critical questions that we've always been asked is the limitations that sometimes our instrument have had in supporting people who are in communal areas and also people who are leasing land, where there's been a view that our instruments sometimes do not assist in this regard. So I want to make it clear that those people who are having permission to occupy, particularly working in communal areas of our country, as well as those with leases on state land, will actually be qualifying for support from this fund. We want to also focus on targeted sectors, which we would like to prioritize as part of this fund that we're launching today. The targeted subsector would include the establishment of high-value, export-oriented horticulture on community-owned agricultural land, some of those which have been restituted land across our country. We also would want to ensure the establishment of competitive contract growers in the poultry value chain, and some of you who might have seen our poultry master plan, this is one of the areas that we said we wanted to increase, as well as the independent poultry producers who are not necessarily linked to the existing contracts. We also want to look at the protein value chain, which is poultry, pork, beef, as well as other related red meat producers. Other viable ventures in agriculture and other agro-processing ventures that support the agriculture and agro-processing master plan and the broader agricultural development efforts will actually be our target. Most question that is always asked, who qualifies? Obviously, South African citizens with a valid ID document, black-owned and managed farming enterprises deemed commercially viable in commodities prioritizing the agriculture and agro-processing master plan. In the case of joint ventures, the non-black partners should have 40% but no less than 26% ownership in the enterprise. So we also want to encourage partnerships. And indeed, some people choose to actually enter in partnerships with those that they know that can assist them in their enterprises. So they're not excluded. But what we want to look at is the participation of black producers to be more than those with whom they partner. This is about transforming our industry. Also want to look at enterprises with 10% farm worker profit sharing, because we know that farm workers are an integral and the most important bedrock for agricultural development. Without our farm workers, we cannot actually attain some of the successes that we do in our agricultural industry. And therefore, for us, these are important stakeholders in the industry. Also, we want to look at youth, women, people with disabilities, and those who come from the military veterans. The National Development Plan acknowledges that transforming the economy also means changing ownership and control patterns. To date, efforts to transfer productive assets ownership have not yielded the desired results, with employees' share equity schemes playing a less significant role. A bolder approach, in our view, and more precise targets are required. Partnerships like the fund we are launching today takes us in the right direction towards emancipating black producers and transforming the agricultural and agribusiness sectors. This partnership will continue for 10 years before it is reviewed. It doesn't mean that we will only wait until the end of 10 years. So we will be reviewing all the projects that we have approved to see whether they are actually still in line with the objectives that it has been created for. It is our dream that at the end of 10 years, we will be able to see the increased market share arising out of this fund, where we will see a number of black producers coming into stream as commercial farmers. And I would like to thank the team, both from IDC and agriculture, who've really worked tirelessly to make sure that we come at this point. But I would also like to extend once again our invitation to the other participating partners, such as our commercial banks. We do work with them on some of the instruments, particularly when it comes to the plus farms, but we would like to see them participating in these blended instruments as we have been having discussions with them, and I trust that through BASA, as well as individual banks, we will be able to find one another in this regard. Thank you very much, TP, for allowing IDC to be a trailblazer in this regard. I know that some of the regional banks, such as Itala, which is a regional instrument, are also very urging excitedly to come into stream, similarly with the Land Bank. So I'm saying all of those who have not yet signed on the dotted line, we are not left behind, but there's always have to be the first. And I think IDC has decided to be a trailblazer in this regard. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I think once you've set the target and challenge, it's for everybody to take the baton and run, continue this relay. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to invite the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Minister Patel, to honor us with his remarks. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, Program Director, and I'd like to give my greetings to my dear colleague, Minister Didiza, to the IDC CEO, TP Nchocho, to Acting Director General Ramasodi, as well as to members of the media and officials who are present. I am pleased to join you virtually today for the launch of this very important agri-industrial fund. And I want to start by appreciating the initiative by Minister Didiza and her department to partner with the IDC to make funding available for such an important part of our economy, and for leveraging, because this is the value of this fund, it will help to leverage even more resources. And I want to congratulate all of you for clinching the deal. It is a fund that can expand both growth and transformation. Under the leadership of my colleague, Minister Didiza, the partnership of the DTIC and now the IDC with the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development has moved to new heights. It's a high energy partnership, and we've seen real leadership driving it from my colleague's side. Today's deal is also about building the IDC as more than just a bank with a balance sheet. It is more actively taking part in helping to manage funds generated elsewhere, bringing its capabilities to bear to squeeze out development impact in how that money is utilized. My colleague, Minister Didiza, has set out the purpose of the fund and how it is expected to operate, and I'm sure that the officials will be adding to it. So I really want to confine my remarks to the importance of agriculture to our GDP and trade, and to show how this fund fits into a broader set of efforts in which we're seeking to build strong foundations to agriculture and agro-processing, and indeed to our economy. The agriculture sector is an important part of the economy. That goes without saying. In last calendar year, during the COVID period, the sector has shown resilience and opportunity with a 13% real growth year on year. And that helped to cushion the impact of COVID-19 on other sectors of the economy. We have vast agricultural land, more than any other country on the African continent. And in fact, the World Bank ranks South Africa as 12th in the world in terms of agricultural land. Our challenge is to ensure we can develop that land, bring water there, ensure that there's the skills and support that's required. And that's what the fund talks about. We have diverse climates across the country that allows us to grow different crops and livestock, from apples in the Western Cape to avocados in Mpumalanga, sugar in KZN, pineapples in the Eastern Cape, wheat in the Free State, sweet grapes in Northern Cape, soya beans in Gauteng, sunflower seeds in Northwest, and mangoes in Limpopo. We're deepening the opportunity which comes from this capabilities that the land has to create new and bustling value chains of agro-processed goods downstream. Trade has been important to our efforts. We export some 160 billion rand in agricultural products to the rest of the world, and we've seen many success stories. One that has been highlighted is the success in citrus fruits, where we are now the second largest exporter globally of citrus fruits. And as Minister Didiza said, land reform is an opportunity to expand our farmer base and develop the land's productive capacity to ensure that its economic return is spread widely across our society. Turning to the integrated approach, this fund is significant and it builds on other efforts by government. First, the master plans in poultry and sugar, as well as in the other sectors that Minister Didiza will be leading us on. Secondly, on the IDC utilizing its own balance sheet to bring to bear resources for agriculture. Third, raising funding from the private sector itself. Fourth, the Buy South Africa campaign to regain market share lost to imports. And finally, developing the African Continental Free Trade Area as a massive new market for agricultural products and for agro-processed and manufactured products. The IDC over the last 5 years has contributed about 4 billion rand from its balance sheet to finance projects that are in agriculture or downstream users of critical agricultural products. In addition, it's managed on behalf of the DTIC, an agro-processing competitiveness fund. And by last year, 43 ventures had been supported and 313 million rand in funds have been committed. The IDC estimates that the agro-processing competitiveness fund will facilitate the creation of 3,796 jobs. Call it 2,796 jobs. Call it 2,800 jobs through the investments that are supported. And in the period ahead, the IDC allocations to agro-processing, in other words, the portion of our balance sheet that we hope the IDC can utilize by finding investable projects and partnering with the private sector, is expected to be nearly 4 billion rand. In addition to what we can do directly with the resources under the control of the state, we do want to partner more with the private sector. So in February this year, we clinched a deal with Coca-Cola, which will see it increasing its procurement from local small-scale farmers for the sugar that is used in its products. And it also went one step further and reached an agreement with ourselves, with government, that it will set aside close to a 250 million rands to support the localization efforts of government across the economy, not just in its own ecosystem, not just in agro-processing, but more widely. Last year, in the merger of Pioneer Foods and Simba Chips by PepsiCo, a global company, they identified that they would make available 600 million rand to support training and supplier development and related efforts in the agro-processing space, working with emerging farmers that will be drawn into their supply chain on grains, on maize, on oats, on potatoes, raisins, and other products. My colleague, Minister Didiza, talked about employee share ownership programs, ESOPs, and I'm pleased to say through the efforts of the competition authorities and government, we now have 20,000 workers in beverage production and in food production that are shareholders through Coca-Cola and PepsiCo. On localization, we have an agreement with business and labor to drive greater localization across the economy. We import about 1.1 trillion rands worth of non-oil products into the South African economy. And we're going to be working closely over the next 5 years with the business community and other stakeholders to try to localize some 200 billion rands worth of goods. And that provides an opportunity also in agriculture and agro-processing. Master plans, as Minister Didiza has indicated, is an important part of our vision. It's really a partnership at the level of the farmers, the processors, retailers, and organized labor. And that has helped to bring all of us together. And we have today Africa's largest sugar industry. And we're driving local procurement through the Sugar Master Plan, which has seen a positive growth of sugar production and the procurement of local sugar last year. Poultry, as the President had indicated in the State of the Nation address, is now producing an additional more than 1 million chickens every week here in South Africa. And finally, agriculture represents one of the big opportunities for exports through the African Continental Free Trade Area. Already export of food and beverage products to the rest of the African continent amounted to some 60 billion rand in 2020, mostly to our direct neighbors. And the reduction in tariff barriers and the improvement of cross-continental infrastructure will open up more space for South African produce across the continent. So in welcoming this fund, in welcoming the partnership between Minister Didiza's department and the IDC, I also want to locate it in these wider efforts that President Ramaphosa is driving and that Minister Didiza and her department and the work of the DTIC are contributing to. So Program Director, it's great to say cheers. I'm using South African water here to raise a bottle, as they say, to this wonderful effort. Thank you very much.
Minister Patel, thank you very much. And as always, your support for the Buy SA movement continues to amaze us and encourages all of us to support local. Because as we support local, we know what the ripple effect of that is. It's jobs created, family sustained, but the economy continues to benefit from import substitution. And thank you very much for the leadership and guidance and the guiding this partnership and how it grows. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to invite the Acting Director General, Dr. Mokate Ramasodi, to engage us and take to the podium and literally just speak to DALRRD, his role as the accounting officer in implementing this partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Program Director. The Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, Minister Thoko Didiza, Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Minister Patel, the Program Director for the day, the CEO for the IDC, and the TP in charge. I would like to say that after the two speakers have articulated their vision for agriculture, I'm left agape in terms of the knowledge that they have within the sector and the level of passion that they have for this sector. My standing here could then be to outline what we as a department envisioned when we started off with this program. And this program was driven by individuals, and I would like to recognize all those individuals who were part and parcel of ensuring that this dream that we had as far back as 2017 in terms of bringing together the vision has happened. Officials from both the IDC and also from the department. And I would like to single out from the department Mem Jiza, Eldam Jiza, who has been the driving force behind this in terms of the department. And I think likewise we will have acknowledgements that would come from the CEO of the IDC. This blended instrument is a grant that would come from the department and a loan portion that would come from the IDC. In anticipation of increasing our access to developmental finance for our farmers, the whole value chain that we have within agriculture, because it is not only for agricultural purposes in terms of primary agriculture, but it's also to do with strategic acquisitions and value creation within the entire agriculture and agro-processing value chain as outlined by the ministers. It is also expected to unlock the potential of agriculture. Minister Patel in the introduction has indicated that agriculture is the only sector that grew through all the 4 quarters of 2020 and grew beyond all expectations by 13.1% as compared to 2019. Now, this is the potential of the sector that we see and need to develop. Currently, the sector has got 40,122 commercial farmers. Of all these farmers, what we need to do is to ensure that the growth that we are having is also inclusive through transformation within them. So we need to ensure that we drive the commercialization of black producers at all levels through acquisition of land, through provision of production inputs, and also to ensure that at the tertiary levels of agriculture there is engagement. We then move to the next slide, which is a slide that would then introduce us generally to a way that the department and the IDC would be looking at this. We depart recognizing the integral part that was there when we started off in terms of the scoping of this funding, recognizing that we needed to look at the entire National Development Plan and also focus our attention on the Chapter 6 of the Development Plan. And the introduction that was made by the Program Director refocused us in terms of where are the growth points that were identified by the NDP. Firstly, in terms of the creation of jobs, 1 million jobs within agriculture. At this moment, we have just over 800,000 people employed in the sector. We are going to move in terms of this intervention to ensure that there's improvement. Our contribution in terms of the GDP, it has been spoken about, and also ensuring that there is transformation, not only in terms of the involvement of black people, but also in terms of youth, women, and people living with disabilities and military veterans as outlined. Now, the scope of funding would say, what do you want to do? The first one would be the acquisition of primary land parcels or commercially viable agricultural sector value chain operators that are there. And this is very important because when Minister introduced the new land reform interventions that we are having, we were also looking at how do we a fast-track land reform in South Africa. And we see this as one of those vehicles that we can start utilizing. Secondly, we are going to support the acquisition of existing operations for expansion, and also in terms of ensuring that we have got those brownfields and greenfields that we can acquire. Let me just indicate that this is very important in terms of the sector. Especially in terms of then massifying production. We have got, in terms of the draft agriculture and agro-processing master plan, a view that says that a theory of change that says that transformation should be driven by growth. We also have got a view to then also support capital expenditure in terms of operations, and also lastly to look at working capital or production facilities that we are having right through, which we think that will assist us in terms of massifying production and also ensuring that we look at those critical areas that were identified within the National Development Plan of high value agricultural crops, and then high impact areas in terms of employment and others. And then this is the criteria that you are going to use. This is a very busy slide, and I would just like to highlight the areas that we think are very important without going deeper into the slide itself, to indicate that we will have a sector focus. And now, within that sector, I've already indicated that we will look at those that have got high export potential. We will look at those crops that would bring us a quick turnaround in terms of income. And we are looking at exports, and we are looking at poultry production. Earlier on, there was a focus in terms of the poultry master plan. We are taking a component out of that master plan to come and implement in terms of this agri-industrial fund. And we're also looking at livestock. There are value chains that we look at in terms of the red meat value chain. And then we have got the sugar cane and the cotton and forestry. So we are looking at the food, fiber and feed value chain as all of those. So there would be engagements in terms of different levels of criteria, and Minister has already spoken to those, where we say we look at the scale of the enterprises, because we want to make impact in terms of whatever intervention that we are having. And we'll also look at the BBBE compliance. In our terms, it will also be part and parcel of the agri-BEE compliance that you are looking at. And then we also look at how are we going to assist this. And the critical part is that we, as the department, would be offering up to a maximum of 40% in terms of our contribution, with a 60% in terms of the other amount coming from the IDC in the form of a loan. But we also have got a limit in terms of how much can we give. It will be 50 million. And we think that over a period of time, this will be very important. Now, in terms of our interventions earlier on, Minister indicated that we are looking at a 10-year period. For the first 5 years, if the program goes well, the department commits to also try and get some funding to ensure that we maximize in terms of commercialization. At this point, I think that I have got to seat program director in terms of allowing the CEO of the IDC to come and take what is left of the slides. And thank you very much for allowing us and affording us this opportunity to outline what this agri-industrial fund stands for. Thank you very much.
Dr. Ramasodi, thank you once again. And I think it's when you map out where the journey started and where we are that one takes into account the effort and the collaboration and what it took to build this partnership. So without further delay, let me invite Dr. Ntshotsho, CEO of the IDC, to give his words.
Program Director, thank you very much. Minister Thoko Didiza, who's here with us, Minister Ibrahim Patel, who joined us earlier on by video link, my colleague, the DG, Dade Ramasodi, members of the legislature who hopefully have joined via the e-platform, industry players in this sector that is so important to our country, the management teams and the professionals from both the IDC and the department, and members of the media who are here. Allow me just to take really a few minutes, not going through any slides, but rather pulling everything together into a conclusion by starting off, firstly, to acknowledge and appreciate the leadership that has been provided by both Minister Didiza and Minister Patel in getting us here where we are. So the vision has been set out, the aspirations have been clearly mapped out, and what is left of us as officials is to live up to this challenge in terms of execution. The resourcing has been provided initially, as Minister Didiza mentioned, an initial 1 billion rand allocation from the department, and as Minister Patel also indicated from the IDC side, our baseline allocation for this particular sector over the next 3 years amounting to approximately 4 billion rand. And we have to combine these strengths and add further to say that represents really the minimum that we should do, the minimum that we can do. And with the collaboration of the other players in the financing sector, we certainly should, I believe, far exceed those amounts. The governance framework has been laid out between ourselves as the IDC and the department in terms of exactly how transaction management and deal management will be managed and coordinated between our respective institutions. I believe a lot of stakeholder alignment has been undertaken in terms of talking to industry leaders and sector participants in order to sketch out the vision and the understanding of what the objectives of this fund are. The message is clear, Minister Didiza, around inclusion, transformation, greater participation of the previously disadvantaged. That call is indeed clear. Let me go on further to say that from the IDC side, I can confirm all of us went through a very difficult period during the last year, 2020, the impacts of COVID, the significant downward valuations in our investments, the reductions in the collections from our client base. But we have gone through the worst, and I believe we have seen the worst. Even in terms of our presentations to the board of the IDC, we have indeed indicated that we are well placed to make a significant contribution as an organization to the economic recovery and reconstruction that has been laid out by the leadership of the country. Our balance sheet has recovered. We continue to have access to international and local funding sources, and therefore capital availability, I'm saying, is a matter that is on the positive as far as the IDC is concerned, and we should be able to combine strengths and execute this leveraged or a blended financing program. In fact, if I can just mention that the IDC has historically been a significant player. Perhaps we haven't played as aggressively as we should in this particular sector. We have a portfolio of just over 4 billion rand already invested in this sector. So as you can tell from the numbers, the intent is to double it in the next 3 years or so. In fact, I think we can do it sooner. Minister Didiza, we actually already have a pipeline somewhere in the order of 950 million rand of transactions already in this particular sector. Yes, perhaps when we apply the criteria, some of the transactions might not qualify and so on and so on. But just as an indication that, one, there is strong appetite on our part, and two, that there is indeed significant market coverage and origination efforts on our part to ensure that we are going in terms of pipeline development. Minister has touched, Minister Patel, indeed, on the opportunities for growth into the continent. I want to touch, Minister Patel, on the significant program that you are leading on special economic zones, and indicate that our assessment and our initial assessment of some of the industrial zones in the Free State, for instance, or in Mpumalanga, they are largely likely to be anchored by agriculture and agro-processing investments. So what we see is an alignment of stars, I believe, Minister Didiza, things coming together and pulling in the direction that we are all aspiring for, and that direction being economic recovery, growth, transformation, employment, and the improvement of the quality of living of the South African nation. Indeed, the one opportunity that presents itself as we do this, not only directly to production and agro-processing, is the opportunity for the green economy, working with the agricultural sector to deploy renewable energy systems in the agriculture sector, to build more infrastructure opportunities, water supply, and so on, through our other divisions and units at the Industrial Development Corporation. Minister Patel touched on a very important point. I just want to reinforce it, this one of working with the major food producers in the country and the major retailers in order to provide that collaboration partnership that will hopefully provide the demand pool for us to be able to support a growing agricultural sector. So, in conclusion, in terms of our readiness, we already have a working agricultural finance team. I think my job now, working together with my colleague, the Chief Operating Officer, Joanne, will be to look at the level of resource capability, and I'm sure we can enhance that if needs be, in order to do the right things, to originate a pipeline of projects, to undertake the necessary assessments and due diligence work, and to take them through the decision processes of the IDC as efficiently as we should, in order to deploy these funds that are so needed out there by society. And yes, acknowledging DG, my colleagues, Joanne led this exercise, William was part of this exercise, Manoj, my colleague, is sitting over there, the professional teams from legal in terms of knocking the agreements and so on. Thank you very much, colleagues, for your efforts and putting this entire initiative together. It is now really shoulders to the wheel. We cannot afford to falter, and our commitment is indeed here. We will live up to the challenge. Thank you very much. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll quickly transition into our question and answer session, but I'd love to steal 2 minutes and invite 2 executive officers to take to their seats and literally conduct a ceremonial signing of this partnership, which I emphasize is 10 years, but the initial funding and the 1 billion talks to the first 5 years, so we do expect scaling and collaborations to take this partnership forward. Gentlemen, over to you, literally signing the first pages and then exchanging your documents ceremonially. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And gentlemen, thank you. And Dr. Ramasodi and TP, if you could literally just take to and keep to those seats for a sec. It's literally reviewing the questions that have come through. And I know we've got 2 microphones that are available. If I could please have them deposited with the 2 executives for questions that are coming through. And ladies and gentlemen who've joined us on the webcast, thank you for the interactions and the questions that have come through. And the first question that comes up is really from Sim Somjala with Almasi. And he asked the pertinent question that asks, will the fund support infrastructure in rural areas with no title deeds? And Dr. Ramasodi, to you.
Thank you very much for the question, Almasi. The Minister in her introductions clearly stated that this will also support infrastructure in rural areas where there is permission to occupy. This is meant to unlock the potential that we have in the rural areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Offense with Komati, Cannon Land, does ask, and it's really a question on the sectors in produce that the fund will support. Will the fund be available to companies hoping to take advantage of the growing produce of cannabis or hemp? The second one it's really just to access the presentation, but all the material will be available as the fund gets rolled out and there's regional engagements. But to the DG, it's really around the produce focus. Will cannabis industry be supported, by the fund?
Thank you very much for the question. I think when you look at the cannabis industry and the questions that you are currently addressing as the department, there are a few legal questions that we are addressing, and we will look forward in terms of, because it's a high value industry, almost in terms of the last figures that I saw, over the next 5 years, 300 billion. Now, if the department is not involved, then it will spell a lot of trouble in terms of those who want to enter the industry. However, for now, in the absence of us addressing those issues, we have highlighted those high-value industries that we are going to be supporting, those with a high export potential. And when cannabis comes into the stream, then there will be engagements in terms of its inclusion. Thank you very much.
If I may add, DG, and just say, from the IDC, indeed, over the past couple of months, we have worked out a strategic framework for looking, not just looking into the cannabis industry, but also already looking into an initial set of project proposals. A couple of them are in the early stages of assessment. To your point, the execution and the progression on those would depend a lot on the requisite regulatory arrangements in this particular industry. But we do recognize it as an area of great growth potential going forward, and already are indeed evaluating a couple of investment proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And there are a number of questions that are quite similar in length, so please permit me to summarize. I think the first question is the nature of the applicant. And DG, if I may invite you to just give a view on who qualifies, startup, established, looking to scale. But I think if I may invite you to, answer that question. And Dr. Nchocho, on your end, the issue was, if you could please just unpack the blended finance package, because the question that's come through was the requirements of the IDC standalone. But I think as we explained, it's really just to give a view of the blended nature and DALA's contribution and the IDC's contribution through its own, business processes. But if I may ask DG Ramasodi to take over.
Thank you very much, Program Director, and thank you very much for the questions that are coming through, which start to also guide us in terms of the appetite that is out there and the interest that the viewers and everybody is having on this matter around the Agri-Industrial Fund. Yes, this fund, as indicated, is a very open fund. It's a high impact fund that we need to implement, whether it's a startup acquisition, or whether it is massifying production in terms of expansion. This fund is there to just deal with those. It is open to all South Africans. There is a big emphasis in terms of gender, in terms of youth, in terms of people with disabilities, and also those who are military veterans. But in terms of the expansion, what we need to do is to commercialize the sector, ensure that there is transformation within the sector. And those areas that we have identified that would be advancing, the primary area that has been identified to transform the sector will be considered. Thank you very much.
Just to say that in terms of specifying the criteria, which Minister Didiza touched on during her speech, if there is a flyer here which I have in my hand which spells out all these criteria and terms of this fund, if they are not already on the website of both the department and the IDC, they will be by the end of today. And so members of the public and industry players can access this information. The question about blended financing, just to put it in simple terms, really remember when a particular business, any business is funded, in simple terms it can either be funded through equity, shareholders' money, or borrowed capital. So, as Minister Didiza said in her introduction, a very important point, it has been identified through practice that particularly transformation businesses in this sector struggle with their equity checks. And this particular facility is meant to go a long way in assisting people with the equity layer of their funding, in addition to their own contribution that they hopefully will be able to put on the table. And then the IDC on its side will then layer that funding structure with a debt instrument or a mezzanine fund instrument or whatever version of instrument that can be used in order to combine both the grant portion and the debt portion of the IDC to create a blended mix of capital, the effect of which would be a lowered or a reduced overall weighted cost of capital for this particular business. And by so doing, hopefully we help in the financial strengthening and the viability of these agriculture and agri-enterprises that we are going to support. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you very much, DG. And just to confirm, the criteria and brochure will be made available for download, but this is really the first phase of an engagement with all our stakeholders. DALAD and the IDC will work on an engagement program that will be publicized for the regional roadshows so that we're able to engage with potential and interested parties to understand the process of application. But even post that, the IDC officers will be available for engagement where you can pick up the content but also take it forward. A number of the questions are really some of our key stakeholders are current players in the sector, and it's always been about the when can we access. And I think as part of the rollout, we'll be able to communicate in each and every province when it effectively starts, the agreement has been signed, and really the implementation that needs to be put in place. That Ramasodi, the question was the Agri Fund? Does it now replace all other initiatives that the department had put in place prior to this partnership with the IDC?
Thank you very much. As indicated previously, I think it was Minister Disease in her intervention. The only replacement that we are having now is in terms of the blended finance. The initial one where we had a pilot project, and the other funding instruments that were there will remain until the department makes that call in terms of the funding instruments. So you would still have funding that would be there for subsistence farmers in terms of Ilima Lizema at that particular level. You'd still have the comprehensive agricultural support program. You'd still have the land development support in the current way that they have been done. But what we are doing as a department is looking at partnerships as instructed broadly by the NDP to say which kind of financial instruments can we use in order of leveraging the funds that we have as government to ensure that we have got maximum impact in terms of the sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, please note that the questions received, some of them are quite specific to individual business opportunities but talk to each other. So you are all noted. We will then take a transcript of the questions received and respond to each individually with updates, with the attachment of the brochure and the criteria so that you have the information you need. But we'll also use your details for communicating when we are next in the province to engage with you. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen that joined us, colleagues that were online and asked the questions, we do appreciate the time. We look forward to the success of this important partnership between the department and the IDC. Thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing and engaging with you in the future. Thank you.